Hello everyone, and welcome to Island Technologies presentation on management and monitoring of DrayTek devices. We'll be running a series of webinars where we talk about the various available options to manage and monitor your DrayTek devices and discuss the tools available for troubleshooting any network issues you may encounter. Today is part 1, where we start off with DrayTek routers with an aim to continue this discussion in our next session with a look at additional management options. Upcoming webinars will cover Wi-Fi management options and central software-based management platforms. My name is Java, and I'm a technical sales specialist here at DrayTek Australia and New Zealand. Today's session will start by looking at the web GUI, or the graphical user interface on DrayTek devices, which includes the dashboard and the system maintenance menu options. We'll also go over different methods to upgrade the firmware and when you should use each of these methods. Finally, I'll introduce VigorACS and VigorConnect, which are software-based central management platforms. These will be covered in more detail in upcoming webinars. And as always, stay tuned at the end, because me and my team will be online for 5 minutes to answer any questions. It's time to begin. Let's start by looking at the web GUI in DrayTek routers. There are many management functions available here. The very first thing you'll notice when logging into the router is the DrayTek dashboard page. DrayTek have designed their dashboard to be interactive and user-friendly. And with the visual display of the router in the dashboard page, one can not only see which ports are active, but by clicking on any port, it will direct to the respective configuration page. It has several other options, such as system information, IPv4 LAN info, IPv4 internet access, interface, security, system resource, and quick access. All these options and their relevant information makes it easy for admins to go through the settings under one page instead of checking through multiple options. The dashboard can also be customized to only display the items you are interested in. At the very top of the web page, you will notice that there are several useful icons which are shortcuts to various functions. We have Home, GUI Map, Web Console, Configuration Backup, User Manual, and Logout icons. I'll briefly describe each of these now. Clicking on the Home icon will take you directly to the DrayTek website. It is a quick way to access the information such as application notes or firmware downloads, etc. from the draytek.com homepage. Of course, the router will need to be online for this link to work. The GUI map is a very helpful feature, especially when you don't know where to find some config options, thereby saving time navigating through all of the menus. Clicking on any of these options will take you directly to the respective configuration page. The Web Console is a useful tool which takes you directly to the CLI or command line interface of the router. It allows you to establish a telnet session with the router without the need to have telnet software installed on your PC. The CLI is often used for diagnostics or to configure parameters that are not available in the web menu of the router. Backing up the router's configuration can be done by clicking on the Config Backup icon. It will prompt you where you want to save the file, which by default is the local drive on your PC. This is a quicker method than navigating to the System Maintenance menu and going to the Configuration Backup option. As I mentioned, another way to back up the router's configuration is from the backup menu located under System Maintenance. Configuration backup can be done in two ways, including manual and auto backup to USB storage. The key difference between these is that with the auto backup option enabled, we can schedule backups periodically or after any config changes are done. Clicking on the User Manual icon takes you to the DrayTek.com website to allow you to download the user guide for the router. For this function to work, the router needs to be connected online first. And finally, clicking on the Logout icon will log you out of the router and take you back to the initial login page. Okay, I'm going to show you a short video produced a few years ago that goes into more detail describing the icons we just talked about. Although it's based on an older router model, the basic idea remains the same. Might I add that the 6 features aren't exactly hidden, but they are easy to miss if you don't see the icons or don't know what they mean.
Hello everyone, my name is Jordan De Cesare. Today I'm going to show you 6 hidden features in the DrayTek Vigor router dashboard. DrayTek has designed a dashboard page for Vigor routers providing information on the router status as well as shortcuts to configuration menus. This video will describe each of these features. First, we will look at the DrayTek Home icon. Clicking on this icon will take you to the DrayTek.com homepage. This is handy if you need to look up information such as application notes or firmware downloads, etc. The next feature is the GUI map icon. Clicking on this icon will display a complete list of configuration menu pages. You can click on any of the links on this page to go directly to the required configuration menu. This will save time navigating the menus. Next, we have the web console icon. Click here to establish a telnet session with the router to bring up the command line interface, CLI. This eliminates the need to have the telnet software installed on your PC. The CLI is often used for diagnostics or to configure parameters that are not available in the GUI in the router. The configuration backup icon provides a shortcut to backing up the router configuration. It provides a quick and easy way without the need to navigate through several menus selecting the required options. For example, normally you need to navigate to System Maintenance, then the Configuration Backup menu, and select the backup option shown here. Clicking on the logout icon will log you out from the router and take you to the router login page. Placing the mouse over the port parameter will display additional information. For example, placing the mouse over the SSID image will display the Wi-Fi settings. The WAN and LAN images provide a shortcut to the configuration menu in the router. For example, clicking on WAN2 DHCP will take you directly to WAN2 DHCP configuration menu.
Alright, moving on. In DrayTek routers, many of the management functions are under the System Maintenance menu. Here's a look at the System Maintenance menu of a Vigor 2865 router. Most of these functions will be available in other DrayOS routers too. DrayTek access points and Vigor switches also have some of these options. Let's take a closer look at them. At the very top, we have System Status. This page provides information such as router model, firmware version, and its build date. We also have a summary of the LAN and WAN details. Next on the list, we have TR069. This is used to set up the router, so it can be managed by VigorACS 2 or VigorACS 3 central management applications, which I'll talk about later. In DrayTek access points and Vigor switches, this setting can also be used with VigorConnect to manage these devices. Next on the list, we have the administrator password settings. Here you can change the admin password and also select a more secure method to log into your router by using either one-time password or two-factor authentication. A user in the local user database can also be assigned as an administrator. In addition to the administrator password, we have the option for user passwords. This is where you want someone to monitor the router and only be permitted to make basic configuration changes. In the login page greeting menu, you can create a custom login page when logging into the router. In the example shown here, we've entered the company name ILAN Technology on the page, and at the bottom we have a custom welcome message. There is an option to upload your own file for the login page. The configuration backup option allows you to backup and restore saved configuration files to the router. It is recommended to regularly save a copy of the router configuration in case it ever becomes damaged. There is an option to have automated regular backups by saving the backup to an attached USB flash drive. A handy feature, if you forget the admin password of the router, is to restore the router configuration without the admin password. In order for this to work, the backed up configuration file must come from the same router, and you will need to reset the router to factory defaults so that you can access the router's login page using the default admin credentials. If you're upgrading from an older router to the latest model, you can migrate the configuration settings provided both routers are of a similar type. For instance, with the new Vigor 2865 router, you can import the configuration file from the older Vigor 2860 or Vigor 2862, as long as they have the firmware versions listed at the bottom of this menu page as shown here. When any issues are encountered with your router, it is often necessary to capture the syslogs for troubleshooting. The syslogs can be sent to an external syslog server or to an attached USB flash drive. You can also select the types of syslogs to capture. These syslogs can also be viewed in the Diagnostics Syslog Explorer menu, but the number of syslogs is limited. There is an option here to save the syslog to an attached USB disk, similar to System Maintenance menu. I'll be going through basic syslog analysis in a future webinar. It is important to have the correct time and date setting in the router. This is required for setting up scheduled tasks in the router, such as internet access time slots, firewall settings to apply at allocated times, and enabling Wi-Fi access for users. Syslogs also include a timestamp, so it does help to have the correct time when analyzing the logs. Certificate generation also requires the correct time and date, otherwise it won't work. WAN budget settings also require the correct time and date, so it matches your monthly internet data plan. There is an option here to use your PC browser time, but a more reliable method is to use NTP, which points to a time server and updates on a regular basis. You will need to ensure that the correct time zone is selected, or you'll see unexpected results for scheduled tasks. SNMP is an easy way to monitor router uptime as well as other various parameters. SNMP agents version 1, 2, and 3 are supported in the latest router firmware. Free SNMP server software, such as PRTG, can be used to monitor the router. You'll also need to enable the SNMP service under the System Maintenance Management menu. This diagram illustrates the principle of SNMP communication. The agent, which will be the DrayTek router, will send traps to the SNMP management station whenever an event occurs. We also have GET and SET requests. DrayTek Vigor routers support MIB2 and ADSL line MIBS. DrayTek have provided a list of OIDs that are supported in the latest firmware and covers several categories listed here. This list is available in the knowledge base article 5517 shown here. The OID is in numerical dot format. One example shown here is 1.3.6.1.2.1.1.2, which is for sysobject ID. This has to be entered in the network management station so that it can poll the router to retrieve this data. The management menu page is where you control access to your router from both the internet and the local network. Here you can give the router a name and disable the auto logout function. Enabling the validation code provides an extra level of security from hackers trying to gain access to your device. If internet access is enabled, it is recommended to also create a list to only permit access from a known source. A more secure method to access the router remotely is to disable internet access and do it via a VPN connection instead. Management ports can also be customized. Brute force protection will block multiple attempts at trying to log in to the router. LAN access setup can also be customized to allow access to the router from certain LANs. A new addition in later firmware versions is panel control. This allows you to customize the appearance and function of the front panel. You can control the LED indicators, push buttons, USB port, and the LAN port access. Here we have LED control where we can switch off all LEDs. We've had some customers who do not want flashing LEDs in their environment, so this helps them. Here we have the three other panel controls. The button control allows you to disable the wireless and factory reset buttons. Disabling the wireless button prevents the Wi-Fi from being disabled if the button's accidentally pressed. Disabling the USB port will prevent people from using that port. Similarly, LAN ports can be disabled to prevent unauthorized users from connecting devices into an unused LAN port. A self-signed certificate is a unique identification for the device, for example, a Vigor router, which generates this certificate by itself to ensure the router security. Such a self-signed certificate is signed with its own private key. The self-signed certificate can be used for services such as SSL VPN and HTTPS. In addition, it can be created for free by using a wide variety of tools. Clicking on Regenerate will recreate the certificate. You should note that the time and date, including the time zone, must be correctly set up for using this function. Next, the Reboot System menu option allows you to restart the router. It can be restarted to use the current configuration or to reset to factory default settings. Be aware that if you are restarting the router remotely using factory defaults, it will mean a trip to the remote site to reconfigure that device. The router can be set to restart on a regular basis according to a time schedule. It may be necessary if some issues are encountered that require a regular reboot. The Firmware Upgrade menu allows you to install the latest firmware version. Clicking on the Check Latest Firmware button will check the DrayTek website if a later version is available for download. You can also install an older firmware if you wish to go back to a previous version. It is recommended to first make a backup of the router configuration before upgrading the firmware, since sometimes if the gap in the version number is too large, the existing configuration may not fully migrate, especially if many new features have been added to the latest version. Another point to note is that when you download the firmware, the zip file will contain two files, a .all and a .rst. The .all will retain the current router configuration, while the .rst will reset the router to factory default settings. This is sometimes necessary when the router configuration has become corrupted and the router is not working as expected. There are other methods that can be used to upgrade routers' firmware, which I'll talk about shortly. Firmware backup is a new feature added to later model routers. This is used by the router to restore functionality should the running firmware become corrupted, causing the router to crash. After the third crash, the router will automatically reinstall the backed up firmware. There are three options to create a backup. These are after a router reboots, after a specified period of time that the router has been running without issues, and finally, a manual backup. The Internal Service User List menu allows you to enable or disable radius and local 802.1x settings for users created in the User Management section of the router. The last item in the System Maintenance menu is Dashboard Control. This lets you select which items to display on your router's dashboard. As I mentioned earlier, in addition to the option in System Maintenance to upgrade the firmware, there are several other methods that can be used. These are listed here. First is using the Web GUI option in System Maintenance menu. Next is using the Firmware Upgrade utility, followed by FTP for remote firmware installation, forced TFTP mode for routers that have become unresponsive, and finally, using VigorACS 2 Central Management System. For VigorACS 2, firmware upgrades can be scheduled to be done automatically after hours. We do have an application note in our knowledge base that goes over these methods. Here it is on your screen. I'll include the link in the description below as well. For each of these methods, it is recommended to first make a backup of the router's configuration before upgrading the firmware. This, however, will not be possible for method number 4, where the router is unresponsive, but hopefully you will have a previous backup you can use to restore the router. Okay, so we've covered the Web GUI method earlier, so I'll not go into details here. The second method that can be used is the Firmware Upgrade utility, which is available from our website's download page. You can use this method when the Web GUI method doesn't work well. You will need to enter the router's IP address and the firmware file to transfer. Simply enter the router's admin password and click Send to start the file transfer. The next method we'll look at is using FTP to upgrade router firmware remotely. Instructions for using this method is covered in our knowledge base article shown here. The first step is to ensure that FTP is allowed from the internet and FTP port is available. This is configured in the System Maintenance menu as shown here. The next steps are to use an FTP client on your PC to send the firmware file to the router. Once this transfer is complete, close your FTP client. The router will then reboot, installing the new firmware. Please note that using the .rst firmware file will reset the router to factory defaults, so you may lose contact with it until it's been reconfigured. The next method is where we use TFTP mode to install the firmware when the router has become unresponsive. For example, in the image shown here, all the LEDs are solid and powering the router off and on does not fix it. This is often caused by damaged firmware or corrupted router configuration. We have a video on our YouTube channel that shows you the process to recover the router by using this method. Also available is an application note available in our knowledge base you can refer to. I'll include those links below as well. Let me just run through the steps real quick. First, switch off the router. Then, using a pointed object, press and hold the reset button, which you'll usually find in the rear of most routers, but some do have it in the front panel. Whilst holding the reset button, switch on the power to the router. Wait until the two LEDs start flashing together, and then release the reset button. The router will remain in this mode for a short period only. Now you can use the firmware upgrade utility to install the firmware. If your organization maintains a large number of routers, it can be very time-consuming to upgrade the firmware on each router individually. Using VigorACS 2 or VigorACS 3 allows you to manage a large number of DrayTek devices from a central console and automate your firmware updates. Firmware upgrades through VigorACS 2 and VigorACS 3 can be scheduled to be carried out after hours. Also, multiple routers can be upgraded at the same time by creating a list of devices. When the VigorACS server receives information from CPE devices, it checks the firmware version and will upgrade the firmware if it is older than the one you've specified in the upgrade list. Since I mentioned VigorACS 2 and VigorACS 3 as an option to upgrade router firmware, I'll now give you a brief overview of this software. VigorACS 2 is a popular management platform for larger DrayTek installations, while VigorACS 3 will be released later this year and is an improved version of VigorACS 2. The VigorACS 3 is the latest version of DrayTek's network management system and is also the core of the DrayTek SD-WAN solution, plus it can do some application optimization and monitoring. We will provide full product details in a future webinar closer to its release date here in Australia. Both the VigorACS 2 and VigorACS 3 are TR069 based centralized management systems for DrayTek Vigor devices. Having a user-friendly interface, they allow system integrators or network administrators to configure, monitor, and manage their DrayTek devices remotely from the comfort of their offices or homes. It has a responsive display, which automatically adjusts and arranges content to suit a variety of devices such as PCs, tablets, or phones. It also allows scheduling or running real-time reports from 6 different types. VigorACS 2 utilizes the TR069 standard for communication between the ACS2 server and the CPE devices. You can have any number of DrayTek devices on the internet that can be managed by the ACS server. In the TR069 communication process, the connection between the CPE device and the ACS server is not permanent. The CPE device establishes the connection with the ACS only at specific points in time determined by the periodic inform interval. It usually lasts several seconds, exchanging all necessary messages between the CPE and the ACS2 server. This short exchange of messages is called a provisioning session. Once logged into the VigorACS 2 server, you will be presented with the dashboard page, which gives you a listing of all your sites and all your devices, as well as a map showing the location of the CPE devices. If you're interested, more information is available in a number of videos on our YouTube channel covering several topics shown here. I'll be including these links in the description below if you'd like to check them out later. Let's now briefly look at VigorConnect, which is a management platform for local DrayTek installations. We will be running a detailed webinar on this software in the future, so today will just be an introduction. VigorConnect is a free software that can be downloaded from our website. It is used to manage and monitor Vigor devices on the local network. As I mentioned, VigorConnect is a free local network management software available from DrayTek to manage and monitor DrayTek access points and switches. Up to 100 DrayTek access points or switches on the local network can be managed. These devices need to be installed on the local network, so it's suitable for businesses with multiple DrayTek APs and switches located within a building on the same local area network who don't require the advanced functionality of VigorACS 2. Similar to VigorACS 2, VigorConnect utilizes the TR069 standard for communication between the VigorConnect server and the CPE devices. It includes device discovery, which automatically discovers DrayTek Vigor access points on the local area network and auto-configures the TR069 settings. For this to happen, the access points will need to be at their factory default settings when installed in the network. Next, we have the dashboard view. This provides comprehensive details of device status, such as AP online/offline status, the SSIDs, channels, and clients. Simply select an AP to drill down into details for that device and see details of its current usage and configuration, all collected neatly in one place. The monitoring feature will notify you when an access point loses connectivity or when a rogue access point is nearby. In addition, VigorConnect displays CPU as well as memory usage. This brings us to the end of our presentation today. To quickly summarize, we looked at the DrayTek router's web user interface management options. We started off with the dashboard and then the options available in the system maintenance menu. This was followed by the different methods to upgrade router's firmware. Then we had a brief look at two management platforms, VigorACS 2 and 3, as well as the VigorConnect. In our next webinar, we will be talking about diagnostic functions in the router and troubleshooting. Okay, that's it for me, but please stay tuned. Me and my technical team will be answering questions in the live chat on the right of your screen for the next 5 minutes. For more information about DrayTek products, please check out our website at www.draytek.com.au or send us an email to sales@draytek.com.au or simply give us a call on 0298 388 99. Don't forget to like and subscribe below. And if you'd like a notification of new Premiere videos we're about to launch, or anytime we put up a new video, please give the bell a click too. Thank you very much for joining in today's session. Please stay masked and stay safe. Until we meet again, goodbye.